Beneath the restless sea, where the waves break like ancient drums upon the shore, there lies a city no map dares to mark. Its towers once reached for the heavens, its bells once sang to the moon, and its people laughed as though sorrow would never find them. But pride is a sound, and in Wyass, it was a sound of stones sinking beneath black water, of hearts breaking as the ocean swallowed their world whole. Some say the city sleeps still, its gates sealed by curses, its secrets guarded by tides that never forgive. Others whisper that on certain nights, when the wind turns sharp and the sea glows pale, you can hear the bells tolling from below, calling not for the dead, but for you. This is not just a tale of a city lost. It is a story of love and betrayal, of gods and curses, of pain that endures through centuries, and of a haunting that refuses to be forgotten. Draw closer now, for what you are about to hear will stay with you long after the waves fall silent. The coast of Brittany is a place where the wind does not simply pass. It lingers, it claws, it sings in tones older than memory. The sea there is never still. It groans like a restless sleeper, as though beneath its waves lie not just sand and stone, but secrets too heavy to rest. Ask the fishermen who push their boats into those waters, and they will tell you that the ocean is alive, watchful, and never forgets what has been taken from it. And when the storms break, when the heavens crack open and the sea rises in fury, they swear to you that they hear bells. Not the bells of churches standing on land, not the metal tongues of steeples clanging the wind, but bells that echo from beneath the water, deep, hollow, muffled as though rung through centuries of drowning. Each toll is mournful, as if carried on currents of grief, and each fisherman who has heard them tells the same story. The bells belong to Wyass, the city the sea swallowed whole. No map shows Wyass. No scholar can agree on where it once stood. And yet, every elder along the Breton coast will lean close and whisper with grave certainty, Wyass was real. The waves you see now are a tomb. Beneath them lies a kingdom that glittered like a jewel, cursed by its own splendor, betrayed from within, and drowned in one night of terror. This is a legend the sea refuses to bury. For centuries, children have fallen asleep to the stories of Wyass. Some with wonder, others with fear. They imagine streets of marble and towers of gold, markets brimming with music, and temples gleaming with jewels stolen from the earth. They imagine a queen whose beauty rivaled the morning sun, and a king so loved he was almost worshipped. But no child sleeps easy after the story is told. But the ending is always the same. The sea came for Wyass, and the city went down screaming. The fishermen, however, do not speak of beauty or splendor. They speak of loss. They tell of ships caught in storms, their sails ripped to tatters, and a voice is heard above the roar of the sea. Voices crying, begging, wailing from beneath the waves. They speak of nets that come up heavy not with fish but with relics no man could explain. Jeweled goblets coated in salt, fragments of carved stone with inscriptions no scholar can read, and masks encrusted with coral that still seem to breathe when held in trembling hands. They speak of nights when the air grows heavy and the smell of burning torches clings to the salt air, and they say Wyass is not dead. It is dreaming, waiting. One winter's evening, as the storm season descended, a sailor named Mail returned from sea in a condition that no one who saw him would ever forget. He had set out strong, black-haired and broad-shouldered, laughing as the waves crashed around his vessel. But when he staggered back into harbor 3 days later, his hair had turned as white as bone, his eyes hollow, his lips cracked and trembling. He was carried to the tavern, laid by the fire, and all who gathered could see he had crossed into some shadow no ordinary man should cross. They begged him to speak, to tell what horror had turned him so. His lips opened, closed, opened again. Finally, with a breath that seemed to tear itself from his chest, he whispered one word, just one, Wyass. And with that, he died. The tavern fell into silence. Some crossed themselves. Some swore aloud. None could explain it. For Mail had been a man who feared nothing. No storm, no shadow, no superstition. And yet he had gone to sea and returned broken, as though the waves themselves had stolen his strength. And now, with his last word, he had left behind only a name older than memory, a name the sea itself seemed to hunger for. In the days that followed, whispers spread across every fishing village and windswept town along the coast. Some said Mail had glimpsed the towers of Wyass rising through the fog, shimmering with drowned firelight. Others swore he had heard the drowned citizens singing hymns to their queen beneath the waves. And still others whispered a figure in the storm, a woman with hair streaming like seaweed, her eyes glowing pale green, who called Mael's name as he sailed past the edge of the known world. Every tale was more desperate, more frightening than the last. But none could deny what they had seen with their own eyes. Mael's white hair, Mael's trembling body, Mael's final word. He had been claimed not by storm or sickness, but by the drowned kingdom itself. The priests and the churches warned against speaking of YS, declaring a pagan tale, a heresy born of fear and ignorance. But the fishermen would not be silenced. They knew what they heard in the storms, those bells tolling endlessly, like a city still clinging to life beneath the weight of the sea. And so the legend endured. Parents told their children not to wander too close to the waves, for the sea might call them by name. Sailors drank until dawn, swearing never to sail on nights when the moon was high and the bells tolled faintly from below. Lovers kissed with desperation on the cliffs, believing that every embrace might be their last before the tide rose and took them, just as it had taken YS. But the truth was more terrible than any whispered tale. There were maps once, old maps, forgotten, faded, drawn on parchment that crumbled at a touch. They showed a city built lower than the sea itself, a marvel of human ambition. Encircled by walls, guarded by gates that kept the ocean at bay. They spoke of a king who built YS for love of his daughter, and of a daughter whose heart was filled not with gratitude but with hunger for power. They hinted at bargains made in shadowed temples, of masked figures who walked by moonlight, of promises whispered in voices not meant for human ears. And always, they ended the same way, with the drowning, with a betrayal that opened the gates, with the ocean rushing like a beast unleashed, with the cries of thousands swallowed by a tide of black water. Yet no historian dared publish these maps. No scholar dared speak of them beyond whispers. For what is history, if not a negotiation with fear? And YS was more than history. It was a wound that still bled in storms, a wound the sea had never let heal. Some say the ocean remembers, that every wave carries memory. Every tide brings back echoes of what has been lost. If that is true, then the coast of Brittany is haunted not just by the souls of the drowned, but by the sea itself, unwilling to release its hold on a kingdom too proud to die. And so the bells toll. On storm nights, they rise from beneath the waves, clear as the memory of a song. Fishermen hear them and freeze, their nets forgotten, their hands trembling on the ropes. Children wake from dreams, sure that they are being called by name. And in the distance, over the roar of the storm, there's always the echo, hollow, sorrowful, as if the city itself is still praying for salvation. The elders tell it best. Sit with them by the fire, listen as the flames crackle, and they will lean close with eyes clouded by memory. They will tell you of nights when the air grew heavy and the sea turned black as ink, and of shapes moving beneath the water like shadows of towers, shadows of spires, shadows of city that should not be. They will tell you that YS has not died. It waits, and every storm is its heartbeat, every bell its breath. And if you dare ask them what happened to Mael, to the sailor who returned white-haired, whispering only that one word, they will fall silent. They will not tell you of the marks on his hands, marks like chains, as though someone had tried to drag him down. They will not tell you the way his eyes stared at nothing, as if seeing beyond the room, beyond the world, into some place where no living man should gaze. They will not tell you because they fear the truth, but the truth lingers like the taste of salt on the air, like the sting of wind in the eyes. YS calls, and one day the sea will answer. The story of Mael's death spread far beyond the fishing villages. Sailors carried it to distant ports. Monks copied fragments of it into their hidden chronicles, and poets sang of it in hushed tones. The name of YS became more than a legend. It became a warning, a reminder that glory built on pride will always be claimed by the sea. Yet for all the warning, for all the fear, the bells still ring. And those who hear them cannot help but wonder, if YS lies beneath the waves, what else waits with it? What faces stare up through the dark waters? What hands reach upward, trembling, begging for release? Some say that when Mael's body was buried, the ground beneath him shifted, as though the sea were trying to claim him even in death. His grave lies empty now, washed away by tides, no stone to mark his passing. Some whisper that he did not die at all, but returned to the city beneath the sea, claimed as one of its own. And when the storm bells toll, they say his voice is among them, crying out, warning, or perhaps welcoming the next to join him. Once, long before the sea claimed it, YS was called the Jewel of France. Not Paris, not Lyon, not any place still standing today could rival its glory. It was a city dreamed in defiance of nature, built lower than the sea itself, a miracle of walls and gates that held the ocean at bay. To walk into YS was to walk into a vision of paradise, a place where the world's boundaries have been broken, where stone, salt, and water have been tamed by the will of a king and the hunger of a princess. The gates of YS were taller than any cathedral, thick with iron, their locks forged by master smiths who swore they would outlast the world itself. They sealed the city off from the sea, keeping destruction at bay with nothing but faith in their strength. And so long as the gates remained closed, the city flourished. Travelers told stories that shimmered like firelight. They spoke of marble towers rising in white spirals, their tips crowned with statues of gods and kings, gleaming in the sun like beacons of ivory. They spoke of streets paved in polished stone that reflected the stars, where musicians played songs that seemed to make even the shadows sway. At night, torches lined the boulevards, casting light, so warm it was said you could walk through YS and believe the darkness itself had been banished forever. The markets overflowed with riches no other kingdom could claim. There were pearls the size of apples, brought from divers who risked their lungs and their lives in the depths. There were silks finer than breath, woven with threads of silver, dyed in colors so bright they seemed to shimmer with their own light. Gold was everywhere, not hidden in vaults, but woven into clothing, hammered into cups, set into the very stones of the city walls. To drink in YS was to drink from goblets that caught the light like flames. To eat in YS was to feast on delicacies brought from every corner of the world, for the city was so rich that no merchant dared refuse its call. And then there were the feasts themselves. Oh, the feasts of YS. They lasted through nights and into mornings, great banquets where music never ceased, where wine flowed like rivers and laughter rolled like thunder. The tables groaned under the weight of roasted meats, candied fruits, and pastries that melted on the tongue. Women in jeweled gowns danced in halls of marble, their hair braided with gold and pearls, their laughter echoing from high ceilings painted with scenes of forgotten gods. Men wagered fortunes on games of chance, their coins clattering like rain, their voices raised in triumph or despair. In YS, no desire went unmet, no hunger went unfilled. It was said that YS had become a mirror to heaven itself. But if you looked too long, you could see the cracks forming, for behind the splendor lay shadows. Behind the laughter, whispers. And beneath the music, the slow beat of corruption spreading through the city like rot through fruit. It began with small things so easily overlooked. A merchant who slipped poison into his rival's wine to secure his stall in the market. A priest who whispered prayers with lips that spoke more of greed than of God. A lord who traded his loyalty for promises of land beyond the city walls. But soon the rot grew bolder. The streets echoed not only with music but with screams, muffled in the dark corners where no torchlight reached. The feast turned from joy to excess, where guests drank themselves senseless and woke with memories they dared not speak aloud. And at the heart of it all was Dahet, the princess of YS. Dahet was beauty given flesh. Her hair shone like fire at dawn, her eyes glimmered with the pale green of the sea itself, and her lips curved in a smile that could undo the will of any man. The people adored her, for she moved among them with a grace that seemed almost divine. Yet those who knew her closely spoke of a hunger that never slept. Dahet wanted more jewels, more lovers, more power, more worship. She filled the city with pleasures and shadows, with masks and secrets, with games no man could win without losing something he could never reclaim. Every night she called for new entertainments, and every night the city obeyed. There were masquerades where identities melted away in candlelight, where vows were broken and hearts were crushed. There were ceremonies whispered to be older than Christ, held in chambers no sunlight touched, where offerings of blood stained marble floors that had once been holy. There were whispers of lovers who vanished, their bodies never found, their faces forgotten except by those who wept in silence. And still the city adored her, for in God's presence, the world itself seemed to bend. The king, Gradlon, saw what Wyas had become, and his heart grew heavy with fear. He was a pious man, a king who prayed to God, who ruled with mercy. He had built Wyas as a gift to his daughter, a city of paradise. Yet he watched as the paradise rotted beneath her hands. He warned her, pleaded with her, begged her to abandon the shadows and return to the light. But God only laughed. She told him that Wyas was hers now, that the people worship her as they had never worshipped him, and that no god could ever touch a kingdom built beneath the sea. Still, the king prayed. He prayed while the feast grew louder, while the laughter turned to cries, while the city drowned itself in its own pleasures. And when he prayed, he asked not for the city to be saved, but for his daughter's soul to be spared. But the city had already chosen its path. For when the gates of Wyas were built, the smiths swore that no force of man or nature could open them without the king's key. That key was Gradlin's burden, worn always around his neck, the weight of a kingdom in a single piece of metal. The people believed it would protect them from the sea forever, so long as it remained in his keeping. But whispers grew in Dahat's chambers, whispers of lovers who wore masks and spoke words not of this world, whispers of rituals that promised power greater than the sea, greater than God, greater than death itself. And in those whispers, one word echoed again and again: the key. The city continued to feast. The city continued to laugh. But beneath the marble towers and the golden walls, shadows gathered. The people began to speak of storms that came faster, stronger, waves that struck harder against the gates than ever before. Some swore they had seen cracks forming, hairline fractures in the iron, like veins spreading across a dying body. The priests warned that sin had poisoned the city, that God would not protect those who had abandoned him. But their warnings were drowned by music, by laughter, by Dahat's smile. One night, when the storm season howled upon the sea, the gates of Wyas trembled. They shook with the fury of waves that battered against them, the ocean straining to break through. The sound carried to the city like a groan of doom. Yet the feast continued, the wine flowed, and the dancers spun in circles of madness. The king sat in silence, his hands trembling, his prayers unheard. And when the storm grew darkest, when the lightning split the sky and the sea rose in mountains of foam, the key was gone. It had been stolen. No one could say when, no one could say how. But the chain around Gradlin's neck lay broken, and the weight that had guarded the city for generations was gone. Somewhere, in the shadows of a palace where music and whispers mingled, the key that held back the sea was no longer in the hands of its king. The gates shuddered again, louder this time, as though the ocean itself had sensed its moment had come. And far off, in the storm, the bells of Wyas began to toll. King Gradlon was not a man carved from marble or lit by torches of glory. He was weary, the weight of crowns pressed deeper into him than the iron of armor or the burden of war. When people spoke of Gradlon, they did not call him conqueror, nor did they name him tyrant. They spoke of a man who prayed, a king who kept his hand steady in storms, a ruler who bent his knees to God even when his people laughed at his devotion. Gradlin's reign was not measured by conquest, but by love, the love of his daughter, Dot, and the city he built for her, Wyas. He had raised its walls for her, laid its stones for her, locked its gates against the sea for her. He dreamed of creating a paradise so dazzling that no hunger would ever gnaw, no shadow would ever threaten, no tear would ever fall. He believed that by giving Dot a kingdom of wonders, he would also give her a heart at peace. But love, even a father's, is not enough to steer destiny. And Gradlon learned, too late, that blood ties are not chains strong enough to bind the will of another. For though he gave Dot the jewel of the world, she gave herself to darker gods. The king prayed every dawn, his voice low and trembling in the quiet halls of marble, his eyes cast upward to crucifixes gleaming in candlelight. Yet as the sun rose and his prayers ended, he heard the faint strains of music not meant for holy ears. Flutes and drums, laughter, moans, rituals that had no altar but the body, no god but hunger. He would walk the palace halls and find masks left lying in the corners, stained with wine and something darker. He would hear footsteps slipping away, whispers cut off mid-breath, the rustle of silk against stone. At first, he told himself it was youth, the folly of a young woman testing the edges of her freedom. But soon, the whispers became undeniable. Da was not merely feasting, not merely dancing, not merely laughing. She was summoning. She was calling upon powers older than Rome, older than Christ, older even than the stones of Brittany themselves. She was bending her city into the shape of her desires, and the city followed, intoxicated. The people adored Diet with a fever that unsettled Gradlin's sleep. They followed her into night, obeyed her commands without question, draped her in pearls and incense, shouted her name louder than they shouted his. He had given her Wyas as a gift, but slowly, imperceptibly, it was becoming hers in truth. She wore it like a cloak, like a crown, and Gradlon, who had once believed himself king, began to feel like a guest within the very palace he had built. The psychological torment carved him hollow. He would kneel in his chapel, whispering prayers into the darkness, begging God for guidance. Was he being punished for pride? Had he sinned in building Wyas lower than the sea, in daring to command the waters with gates and keys? He sought answers in scripture, but the words blurred with every passing night of Dahet's feasts. For what is scripture against the laughter of thousands, against the echo of drums that never cease, against the shadows of masked figures sliding into his daughter's chambers when the moon rose high? He asked Dahet, begged her, pleaded with her as only a father could. My child, my treasure, you walk paths that lead away from God. He held her hands and searched her eyes for the girl she had once been, the child who clung to him when storms shook the coast, the daughter who laughed in sunlight, but her eyes glimmered cold like the sea at midnight. She smiled, her lips curving with something both tender and cruel, and whispered, Father, your God is not mine. Those words tore deeper into him than any blade. From that night, Gradlon lived in dread. He still ruled, but his voice carried less weight than Dahet's smile. His soldiers bowed to him, but their loyalty wavered when she called. His priests warned him of the growing darkness, but he silenced them, afraid of angering the daughter he could not control. Every day he walked the halls of marble, surrounded by splendor, but within him was only decay, only helplessness, only the slow erosion of authority. The city, too, reflected his torment. It gleamed on the surface, gold inlaid in walls, jewels dripping from towers, feasts echoing with music. But beneath the surface, shadows deepened. Merchants cheated openly. Priests whispered prayers to idols. Lovers vanished without trace. At night, the sea itself seemed to shudder against the gates, as though it, too, sensed the sin festering behind the walls. Gradlon dreamed of drowning. Again and again, he woke with the taste of salt on his lips, with the roar of waves in his ears, with the vision of a city sinking into darkness while Dahet stood above it, her arms raised in exultation. He told no one. He carried his nightmares alone, praying harder each morning, but the prayers felt thin, fragile, like spider silk stretched over an abyss. The rumors of Dahet's rituals spread like wildfire. They spoke of chambers lit with candles of black wax, of masks carved in shapes no human face could fit, of lovers chosen and discarded in a single night. Some claimed she drowned them in her sleep, that she took their breath into her lungs and let their bodies sink into the canals of the city. Others whispered that she fed them to gods no one dared name. And yet, no proof ever surfaced, no body was ever found. All that remained were the whispers and the silence of those who once loved and were never seen again. Gradlon confronted her once, only once, when the whispers grew unbearable. He entered her chambers unannounced and found her in a gown of crimson, her hair tangled with pearls, her lips painted with a smile he did not recognize. Around her lay masks scattered on the floor, their empty eyes staring up at him. She rose to meet him, her voice soft as honey, her hands warm as fire. She called him father, kissed his cheek, and promised him nothing but love. But behind her, in the shadows, he thought he saw movement, a figure slipping away, faceless, silent. He tried to follow, but she caught his arm. Her grip was iron, stronger than it should have been. Do not chase shadows, father, she whispered, her breath hot in his ear. They belong to me. That night, Gradlon wept alone. not as a king, but as a father, for he knew then that he had lost her. The days that followed brought him no peace. The storms grew worse, pounding the gates with fury. The priest spoke of omens, blood in the wells, birds falling dead from the sky, the bells of churches tolling without hands to strike them. Gradlon listened, nodded, prayed, but he did not act. For how could he act against his own blood? How could he condemn the daughter for whom he had built a kingdom, for whom he had defied the sea? He could not raise his hand against her, even as he felt the city slipping beyond his grasp, even as he knew ruin was approaching. And so he bore the torment in silence, torn between his God and his blood, between his crown and his daughter. He ruled a city that was no longer his, prayed to a God who no longer answered, and loved a child who no longer belonged to him. Then came the night when the storm broke, when the sky split with lightning and the sea hammered the gates like a beast straining at his chains. The city feasted as always, laughter echoing, wine spilling, Dot dancing in her crimson gown. But Gradlon sat alone, his hands clenched, his eyes hollow. He felt the walls tremble, the gates groan, the very stones of Wyatt shudder with each wave. He prayed one last time, whispering for mercy, but the words felt as empty as the goblets overturned in the banquet hall. And as the moon rose high, silver on black waters, he saw him, a figure, masked, slipping into Dot's chambers. The mask gleamed pale in the moonlight, its face hidden, its eyes black hollows. The stranger moved without sound, as if the shadows themselves parted for him, as if the night welcomed him as one of its own. Gradlon rose, his breath caught in his chest, his body trembling with dread. He knew, with the certainty of a man who has seen his fate written in dreams, that this stranger was no ordinary lover, no mortal guest of Dot's endless feasts. This was something else, something summoned, something the city should never have welcomed. The mask vanished into her chambers, the door closing behind, and Gradlon, king of Wyatt, father of Dot, stood frozen, powerless, unable to move, unable to act. The storm raged, the gates groaned, the city feasted, and in the chambers of the princess, a masked stranger entered beneath the silver eye of the moon. He came at night. No one saw him enter the city. No ship bore his arrival. No hoofbeat rang on the cobbled streets. Yet when the moon was high, when shadows lengthened and music faded into whispers, he was there. His presence spread like frost, unseen but felt, a chill that prickled the skin of those who passed him in alleyways without knowing why they shivered. His mask was red, not painted, not gilded, but a shade that seemed to pulse like fresh blood, gleaming whenever moonlight touched it. His voice was low, smooth, and wrong, as though he spoke with more than one tongue at once. Words fell from his lips that no priest had ever written, words that carried the echo of worlds not meant for mortal ears. Dot saw him first, or perhaps it is truer to say he chose to be seen by her. She had grown tired of the endless laughter, the feasts, the masks of her own court. The dancers blurred together. The lovers whispered the same empty vows. The priests begged her in voices so hollow they could no longer stir her. She longed for something greater, a fire that would consume her, a mystery that would unmake and remake her, a voice that would speak to the secret hunger in her heart. And then, one night, he was in her chamber. The torches did not flicker when he entered. The guards outside did not stir. The doors did not open. But there he was, standing by the window where the moon painted silver lines across her marble floor. He bowed, as if mocking the gestures of kings, and when he raised his head, the red mask glowed like an ember. "Who are you?" she asked, but her voice did not tremble. Dot was never one to fear shadows. His reply was neither name nor title. It was a string of syllables that twisted the air itself, words that felt heavy in her bones, words she had never heard yet somehow recognized, as if they had been waiting within her since birth. When he spoke, the candles bent toward him, their flames straining as though drawn by a hidden wind, and she, who had grown weary of mortal pleasures, felt her heart ignite. He came again the next night, and the next, always at the hour when the city quieted, when even the drunkards had collapsed into slumber, always through no door, no gate, but as if he had stepped from the air itself. His words were like poison and perfume all at once. He spoke of power that did not beg for permission, of freedom that scorned chains, of kingdoms that bowed not to God, but to those who dared take what they desired. Dot drank his words like wine. Her passion turned to obsession. She adorned herself not for the feast of Wyas, but for him. Waiting for his shadow to lengthen across her chamber wall, she wore masks to mirror his, crimson silks to echo his presence. She dismissed her lovers one by one, until no man dared seek her company. But she belonged to another, not a man of flesh and crown, but figure cloaked in mystery, a stranger whose mask gleamed with promises too dangerous to refuse. And yet, for all her passion, there was terror in her father's heart. Gradlon felt it in the stones of the palace, in the silence of the chapel, where no prayer seemed to reach beyond the ceiling. He watched his daughter drifting further from him, her eyes gleaming with secrets, her lips curling with cruel amusement whenever he spoke of God. He heard rumors of a red-masked figure, of whispers too dark for human throats, of nights where Dot's chamber glowed with light, though no candle was lit. He tried to warn her. "Daughter," he said, "you walk with shadows. They will not love you. They will devour you." His hands trembled as he spoke, his voice thick with the weight of both king and father. But Dot only laughed. Her laughter was soft, but cut like glass. "Father, you built me a kingdom lower than the sea. Did you think we could keep heaven's grace here? We are beneath the sky, beneath the waves. Why not embrace the powers that dwell below?" Gradlin's heart cracked. He prayed harder, longer, kneeling until his knees bled on cold stone. But every prayer was swallowed by silence. God, it seemed, had turned his face away from Wyas. Meanwhile, the stranger's influence deepened. He spoke of the sea gates, those colossal barriers of iron and stone that held back the endless ocean. He spoke not with fear, but with scorn. "These walls," he told Dot, his voice smooth as silk, "are chains. You are queen of a kingdom caged. The sea should serve you, not you it. Open the gates, and you will not drown, you will be free." "Free," Dot had whispered, the word lingering on her tongue like a secret kiss. The more he spoke, the more she believed. She began to see the gates not as protection, but as insult. Why should Wyas, greatest of kingdoms, cower behind barriers? Why should the sea itself not bow to her will, as the people of Wyas did? In her dreams, she walked through streets where waves bent to her command, where fish swam like courtiers and drowned men rose to kneel at her feet. She saw herself crowned not with pearls, but with foam and lightning, and the stranger always at her side, his red mask glowing like a promise. Gradlon noticed the change. He saw her drifting through the palace, her eyes distant, her lips moving with words she did not speak aloud. He saw her stand by the windows at night, staring at the gates as if they called to her. He feared the city was slipping, not only from his rule, but from God's grace entirely. He begged his priests for guidance, but they shrank from him, afraid to speak aloud the truth that everyone already knew. Wyas no longer belonged to God. It belonged to Dot, and Dot belonged to the stranger in the red mask. The feast grew stranger, darker, the masks more grotesque, the music more frenzied. Fires burned blue in the banquet halls. Dancers moved as though possessed. Some nights, guests vanished, never seen again, never spoken of. Gradlon sat in silence, his crown heavy, his hands trembling, watching as his daughter presided over chaos with a smile of triumph. And beside her, in the shadows, the red mask gleamed. Whispers spread beyond the city walls. Fishermen claimed to see lights beneath the sea, shapes moving in the depths that should not move. Travelers swore the air grew heavy as they approached Wyas, that their horses balked and refused the gates. Storms came faster, stronger, pounding the sea gates with fury. And always, when the lightning split the sky, some swore they saw a figure standing upon the walls, crimson mask gleaming, arms spread wide as if welcoming the storm. The key, the great iron key that held the locks of Wyas, was Gradlin's last offense, his final burden. He wore it close, hidden beneath his robes, the weight of salvation pressed against his chest. But Dot's eyes lingered on it. She asked him once, softly, almost playfully, what it would feel like to hold the sea in her hands. He said nothing, clutching the chain tighter, but he saw the hunger in her gaze. And one night, the chain lay broken. No one saw her take it, but the key was gone. Gradlon woke to emptiness on his chest, his hands searching in dread only to grasp nothing but the hollow of loss. He knew, without asking who had taken it. He knew, without speaking, where it would go. That night, Dot stood at her chamber window, the key gleaming in her hand. The stranger was behind her, his red mask glowing with triumph. He whispered words that made the air tremble, words that promised eternity, words that bent reality until the waves themselves seemed to stir in answer. "Open them," he breathed, "and you will be free." Her heart thundered, not with fear, but with desire. The city feasted still, laughter echoing to the halls, music rising like madness. No one saw her slip away. No one noticed her crimson gown vanish into the shadows. Only the stranger followed, silent, certain. The storm raged. The gates groaned. The ocean clawed at the walls like a beast starving for blood. And died. Daughter of Gradlon, Princess of Wyas, walked toward the sea gates at midnight with a key in her hand. The gates of Wyas were more than walls of iron and stone. They were the heartbeat of the city, the boundary that defined its defiance against the sea. Enormous teeth, black and gleaming, they locked the ocean away with a sound like thunder. When storms raged, when the tides rose higher than towers, the people of Wyas would laugh and drink, safe in the knowledge that the gates held. Their entire world rested on that certainty. The gates would never open unless the king willed it, and the king, pious and burdened, kept the key close as a soul. But now, in the dead of night, with the storm clawing at the city and lightning cutting the heavens apart, that certainty began to tremble. The gates stood shaking against the ocean's fury, their hinges groaning as wave after wave smashed against them. They looked less like walls of protection and more like jaws straining to bite through their chains. The sea had waited centuries, patient, gnawing at stone, hungering for the city that dared defy it. And tonight, it was stronger, hungrier, closer than ever. Through streets lined with drunken laughter and music that echoed from marble halls, Dot walked unseen, the crimson gown that clung to her shimmered in the torchlight. But no eye followed her. The feast raged on, goblets overturned in wild games, dancers spinning in frenzy, voices shouting in delight. They did not notice the silence in her eyes, the gleam of iron in her hand, the way her shadow moved in rhythm with another behind her. The stranger in the red mask, silent as ever, walking at her side like fate itself. Her fingers curled around the stolen key, the key of Wyas, the key of salvation. The weight of her father's entire kingdom pressed against her palm. The stranger leaned close, his voice pouring into her ear like silk and venom all at once. The sea is not your enemy. The chains are. Open them, and you will not drown. You will rule. Her heart raced with a thrill sharper than fear. She saw herself above the waves, crowned not by her father's prayers, but by her own hunger. She saw the ocean bend like a servant, storms swirling at her command, drowned souls rising to bow before her. The gates loomed ahead, black against the silver of the storm. Lightning flashed, and the water beyond them surged high, white with fury. The sound of the waves was a monstrous breath, roaring with a hunger no feast could silence. Behind her, the city danced on. Torches flared, music played. The laughter of men and women echoed down the marble streets. None knew their lives balanced on the edge of her hand. None saw the key glint as she raised it. The lock was older than her bloodline, forged by smiths whose names have been forgotten, bound with oaths whispered to both heaven and earth. It was a lock that had never turned except at a king's command. Its grooves were cut deep, its iron veins pulsing with the weight of centuries. No thief had ever dared touch it. Until now, Dot stepped closer, her crimson gown whipping in the storm winds, her hair streaming like fire behind her. Her fingers slid the key toward the lock. The cold iron met her skin, biting, but she did not flinch. She wanted its bite. The lock groaned. The sound was deep, ancient, a sound that echoed through stone and bone alike. It was a groan of history bending, of vows breaking, of promises being undone. The gates trembled, shuddering against the waves, and for the first time in centuries the ocean felt the shift of its prison. The stranger's hand touched hers, guiding the key, pressing it deeper. His red mask glowed faintly in the lightning, and she thought for a moment she saw no reflection in its surface. only darkness. Inside the city, the feast swelled. The wine poured. The dancers screamed with delight. The music rose to deafening heights. Priests stumbled from chapels, muttering prayers drowned by laughter. The king sat in his chamber, hands clasped, his lips trembling in silent supplication. Though he already knew his prayers were dust, he felt it deep in his chest. He felt the gates shudder, and he knew his blood had betrayed him. Still, the city celebrated, unaware. Children slept beneath embroidered blankets. Merchants counted their coins by candlelight. Lovers whispered empty vows in corners. No one looked toward the sea. No one saw their fate, standing at the gates with the key in her hand. The waves surged again, crashing higher, harder. The gates shook with a sound like thunder breaking mountains. Water sprayed through cracks, cold and sharp. The sea roared, tasting freedom. Dahet pressed the key further. Her lips parted, her eyes gleaming with madness and ecstasy. "Freedom," she whispered, echoing the stranger's word. Behind her, he leaned close, his voice low, layered with echoes not of this world. "Yes, my queen, freedom." The lock turned. It was not a click, not a snap, but a groan that reverberated through every stone of YS. The sound carried down streets, through halls, across markets. Dogs howled in their sleep. Horses bucked in their stables. The king's head jerked upward, his heart pounding with the weight of doom. The gates shuddered again, louder, harder. The ocean struck with fury, sensing the weakness, slamming into the iron teeth with waves taller than towers. Spray burst upward, mingling with rain, falling like shards upon Dot's face. She closed her eyes and smiled, the salt burning her lips like a lover's kiss. Inside, the feast went on. The music swelled. The laughter grew. Goblets shattered on marble floors. No one heard the groan of the gates. No one felt the trembling beneath their feet. They danced on, blind to the doom that gathered like thunder beyond their walls. The lock turned further. The key ground against ancient metal. Sparks flying as though the storm itself had entered the veins of the gate. Bradlaugh rose at last, stumbling from his chamber, his eyes wild, his breath ragged. He shouted for his guards, but their ears were deafened by music, their hands too drunk to grip their swords. He called for his priests, but their voices were drowned by laughter, their prayers long abandoned. Alone, he staggered to the halls, his crown heavy, his steps faltering. He knew he would be too late. The stranger's voice grew louder, filling the air around Dahet like a hymn. "The sea is yours. The world is yours. Open it and be eternal." She pressed the key one last time. The lock screamed, and then silence, a breath, a heartbeat, a stillness so complete that even the storm seemed to pause. The city lay frozen, torches flickering, dancers caught mid-step, laughter dying on lips. For the first time, YS felt the hush before destruction. Then it came, a monstrous roar, not of wind, not of thunder, but the sea itself. The sound was older than language, older than prayer, older than kings and crowns. It was a voice of the ocean, rising in triumph after centuries of hunger. The gates burst open. Iron teeth bent, stones shattered, locks split apart like bone beneath an axe. The ocean surged forward, a wall of black fury taller than towers, wider than streets, heavier than death itself. The gates of YS, once the pride of its people, now lay broken, shattered, consumed. And the city feasted still, unaware that doom rushed toward them with the roar of eternity. The sound came first, not thunder, not the wind, not even the roar of the storm. It was deeper, older, a voice so vast it seemed to tear through the marrow of the world. The gates of YS had burst apart, and in that shattering came the cry of the ocean unleashed. The voice of water, black and endless, surging forward with the weight of eternity. Then the sight followed. A wall of black water rose on the horizon, taller than towers, wider than streets, heavier than the breath of every man, woman, and child in YS combined. It blotted out the sky, swallowing the moon, devouring the stars, leaving only a sheet of darkness that moved with purpose. The sea had been patient for centuries, but now it came not as tide nor wave, but as judgment. The first towers vanished before anyone could scream. Marble crumbled like sand. Statues toppled, their jewel crowns vanishing in a spray of foam. Streets flooded in heartbeats. Torches hissed and died, silk banners torn to shreds beneath the weight of water. And still, within the walls of the palace, the feast continued. Lovers leaned close, lips brushing, only to be torn apart as water smashed through the windows, sweeping them into the black. Priests stumbled forward with torches raised, their prayers drowned in gurgling cries as the flood swallowed them, the flames extinguished in their hands. Musicians clutched their instruments, their strings snapping as they were hurled beneath the waves, their last notes echoing like cries of despair. Children woke screaming, their beds floating for moments before capsizing into dark silence. Merchants clutched chests of gold, dragging them towards safety, but the weight pulled them faster into the abyss. Dancers spun not on marble floors, but in whirling currents, their jewel gowns torn from their bodies as the sea claimed them. The city that had laughed at storms, the city that had mocked the sea, was consumed in minutes. Through the chaos, King Gradlon mounted his black stallion, its hooves slipping on slick stone, its nostrils flaring with terror. His crown was gone, his robe soaked, his face pale with dread. He did not think of the throne, nor the walls, nor the treasures of YS. He thought only of escape, of the lives still clinging to breath, of salvation that dwindled with each surge of water. And then Dahit, she clung to him, her crimson gown heavy with salt, her hair wild, her eyes wide with a frenzy that was part terror, part ecstasy. She screamed his name, her hands digging into his shoulders, her voice raw as she begged him not to leave her. He pulled her onto the horse, his heart breaking, his mind torn. For she was his daughter, his blood, the child for whom he had built a kingdom beneath the sea. And though she had betrayed him, though she had betrayed he could not abandon her. Together, they fled through streets that had become rivers, beneath arches collapsing into foam, past towers crumbling like ash. The stallion leapt over torrents, its hooves striking sparks even as the water surged higher. Behind them, the sea chased, relentless, merciless, devouring every breath, every heartbeat. But the ocean does not forget, and the storm does not forgive. As they fled, the voice came. It thundered through the storm, through the waves, through the stones themselves. It was not the voice of man nor beast, but of judgment, of eternity, of the sea itself. Cast her down, it thundered, or be drowned with her. Gradlon froze. The word struck him harder than any wave, deeper than any wound. His daughter clung to him, sobbing, screaming, begging him not to listen. Her nails tore his cloak. Her arms wrapped around him with desperate strength. Her voice rose above the storm, shrill and broken. Father, no, do not leave me. I am your blood. You cannot abandon me. The horse reared, terrified, as another wall of water crashed behind them. Gradlon felt the spray on his neck, felt the ocean clawing closer, felt the weight of judgment pressing down. The voice roared again, louder, merciless. Cast her down or be drowned with her. His heart tore in two. He saw her as a child, running through the gardens of YS, laughing as she plucked flowers from marble vases, her hair catching sunlight like flame. He saw her clinging to him in storms, her small hands trembling as she begged him to keep her safe. He saw her smile when he promised her a kingdom, when he swore she would one day rule the jewel of France. And he saw her now, her eyes wild with hunger, her hands stained with betrayal, her lips curved in a scream that echoed with both fear and defiance. He could not let her go. She was his blood, his soul, the reason he had built YS. How could he condemn her, even as the sea demanded it? How could he live if he cast her into the abyss? But the storm rose higher. The horse stumbled, nearly swept away. The city behind them was gone, devoured, drowned. The people screamed as one, their cries vanishing into water. And still Dodd clung to him, heavy as chains, pulling him down, dragging him closer to the sea. The voice thundered once more, final, absolute. Cast her down or be drowned with her. Gradlon wept, his tears mingled with rain and salt, his cries lost in the roar of the ocean. He looked at his daughter one last time, saw her face twisted with terror, with rage, with desperation, and with hands trembling, with heart breaking, with soul shattering, he pushed her from the horse. She screamed as she fell, her arms flailing, her gown spreading like blood in the water. The sea rose to meet her, swallowing her in a single surge, pulling her beneath without pause, without mercy. Her voice cut off mid-cry, leaving only silence, leaving only the roar waves. And then the horse surged forward, free of her weight. The storm still raged, the waters still pursued, but Gradlon rode faster, carried by desperation, by grief, by the faint hope of salvation. Behind him, the city was gone. Ahead of him, only darkness, only storm, only the unknown. But in his heart, the wound was eternal. He had cast down his daughter, his blood, his reason for building YS. And though he fled, though he lived, part of him had already drowned with her. In the dark waves, her crown still gleamed, even as the city crumbled, even as marble towers sank into blackness and golden walls dissolved beneath the tide. Dot's crown shone like a solitary star in the abyss. The sea, ravenous and merciless, had torn away her gown, her voice, her breath, but not her crown. It floated for an instant above the waves, a glimmer of royalty refusing to drown, as though the sea itself recognized her not as victim, but as offering. King Gradlon saw it, from the back of his horse, galloping through flooded streets that were no longer streets but rivers. He saw that cruel glimmer of light, and his heart twisted with pain. His daughter, his blood, his reason, his sin, was being pulled into the abyss. The horse surged forward, foam slashing at his flanks, but her fingers clung to him still, clawed at his cloak, dragging him down with desperate weight. "Father!" she screamed, her voice shredded by salt and storm. "Do not abandon me." The storm's voice roared louder, deeper, unearthly. Cast her down or be drowned with her. His hands trembled on the reins. His soul split in two. He looked at her face, drenched with salt and terror, her eyes wide with the fear of a child, but burning also with the fury of a queen betrayed. He remembered her laughter as a child, when she danced barefoot through the gardens of YS. He remembered the way she clung to him during storms, small hands gripping his robes as she whispered, "Save me, Father." He remembered promising her that no harm would ever come, that he would build her a paradise, and he had kept that promise. He had given her YS. He had given her the jewel of France, a city below the sea, a miracle of iron and stone. But what had she given in return? She had given her heart to shadows. She had given her soul to a stranger with a mask of blood. She had taken the key, broken the oath, opened the gates, unleashed the sea, and now she dragged him down with her. The horse reared, its hooves striking sparks against stone, nearly flung into the water. The waves clawed closer, rising higher, swallowing the cries of the people still fighting for breath. Behind him, YS was gone. Streets vanished, towers shattered, voices silenced. Ahead of him, the shore was a faint hope, a shadow in the distance. His daughter clung tighter, screaming, sobbing, begging. The voice of the storm came again, merciless, final. Cast her down or be drowned with her. His heart broke. His soul split. He knew there was no saving her. There was no saving YS. There was only the cruel choice between his daughter and the remnants of his kingdom, between blood and survival, between love and doom. He looked at her one last time, and then, with tears streaming, he loosened his grip. Her scream cut through him like a blade. She clawed at his cloak, her nails tearing fabric, her eyes wide with disbelief. "Father, no!" But his hands opened. She slipped, she fell. The sea rose to meet her, black and merciless. For an instant, her crown still gleamed, a shard of light against the storm. Then the waves swallowed her whole. The water closed like jaws, and she was gone. Gradlon wept. His cry tore through the storm, a sound of grief deeper than thunder. He had cast down his only child, his beloved, his reason for YS, his sin. He had saved himself, but in that moment, part of him drowned with her. The horse surged forward, freed of her weight. Its hooves pounded against stone and spray, its nostrils flaring with terror, its eyes wild. Gradlon bent low over its neck, his tears lost in rain, his heart heavy with unbearable grief. He rode toward the shore, toward the faint chance of salvation, though every step was soaked in loss. But as Dahat vanished beneath the waves, something shifted. The stranger in the red mask was gone. The one who had whispered of freedom, who had stood by Dahat's side as she turned the key, who had guided her hand, who had promised her eternity, vanished. No trace, no shadow, no footprint upon the flooded streets. He was gone as though he had never existed at all, as though he had been nothing but a phantom conjured by the storm. Yet the storm grew worse. Lightning split the sky in jagged spears. Thunder cracked with the force of mountains shattering. The sea rose higher, black walls crashing against what remained of YS. Voices still cried out, desperate, broken, gasping for air before vanishing beneath the waves. Gradlon urged his horse forward, but the ocean followed, a beast unleashed, a god enraged. He thought casting Dahat down would end it. He thought her sacrifice would appease the storm, would silence the sea. But the waters surged stronger, wilder, hungrier. The betrayal had already been done, and the ocean demanded more than one soul. The people of YS drowned together. Merchants clutching their coins, priests with their torches sputtering in salt, children with their arms stretched upward in futile hope. Lovers were swept away mid-kiss, their embrace torn apart, their final breath stolen by the tide. Marble towers toppled into waves, statues of God shattered into dust. Streets turned into rivers of death. The city was gone, but the sea was not finished. Gradlon clung to his horse, his eyes wild, his heart broken. He whispered her name over and over, as though the waves might return her. Dahat, Dahat, Dahat. Each cry was swallowed, each prayer ignored. Then something moved. Far behind him, in the place where Dahat had sunk, the waves churned. The black surface split, foaming white. For a heartbeat, he thought it was her crown rising again, some mercy granted, some miracle bestowed. He pulled the reins, staring back, his breath caught. But it was not her crown. It was fire. A figure rose from the sea itself, a shape wreathed in flames that did not sputter in water, but burned brighter, hotter, fiercer. The storm bent around it, lightning striking and splintering, thunder cracking in chorus. Its form was human and yet not, taller than any man, its outline shifting like heat upon stone, its face hidden in fire. Where Dahat had drowned, something else had risen. Gradlin's heart froze. He did not know if he stared at his daughter reborn, her soul transfigured by the abyss, or he looked upon something older, darker, summoned by her sin, and sealed by her fall. The flames blazed higher, casting light across the drowned city, illuminating the faces of the dead beneath the waves. Eyes stared upward through black water, mouths open in silent screams. The city was gone, but this figure promised it was not forgotten. The horse reared, terrified, its hooves slashing the air. Gradlon clung tight, his eyes fixed on a flaming figure rising from the sea. The storm howled louder. The sea roared higher. The air itself trembled. And in the heart of the flames, he thought he heard her voice, not screaming, not begging, but laughing. Some say the stranger was no man at all, not a traveler, not a lover, not even a phantom of flesh and blood. They whisper instead that he was the devil himself, come to YS in the shape of desire, cloaked in crimson, crowned in shadows, masked in the color of blood. For who else could have whispered such words? Who else could have guided a hand to Dahat, daughter of kings, to turn the key that unbound the sea? Who else could vanish when doom struck, leaving no trace but ruin, and yet linger still in the terror of every soul? And so the tale goes, when Dahat sank beneath the black waves, it was not silence that greeted her. It was him. She fell, her crown flashing once before the sea consumed it. Her body dragged into the abyss. Water clawed at her lungs. Salt burned her eyes. Darkness wrapped her limbs. She screamed, but no air carried her cry. The sea, merciless, filled her mouth and throat, pressing her down deeper and deeper. Yet before her life could end, before the ocean could claim her entirely, she felt hands. They were not the hands of her father. They were not the hands of the drowning. They were colder, stronger, fingers like iron that closed around her wrists. She opened her eyes, wide and wild, and there he was, the stranger in a red mask, waiting for her in the abyss. His mask did not dull in the black water. It glowed, red as embers, burning in the void. His cloak billowed though no current stirred. His eyes, if eyes they were, gleamed like coals behind the mask. And in the silence of the drowned world, she heard him speak. "You are mine." The words were not carried by water. They echoed inside her skull, inside her heart, in the very marrow of her bones. She thrashed, struggled, fought against his grip, but the sea obeyed him. The water wrapped tighter around her, pressing her closer, binding her as though the ocean itself bent to his will. "No!" she screamed in her mind, though no sound escaped her lips. "I am a queen. I will not bow." And yet she already had. She had turned the key. She had opened the gates. She had broken her father, betrayed her people, and given the sea its freedom. The bargain had been made long before she sank. The stranger's grip dragged her deeper, past the ruins of towers, past the bodies of her people tumbling in the currents, their eyes staring, their mouths open in eternal screams. She tried not to look, but she could not escape them. They turned as she passed, as though watching her, accusing her, damning her. She reached for them, begged for forgiveness, but their arms never lifted. They sank and swirled in silence, faces frozen in horror, deeper still, into the abyss, into a darkness no sun had ever touched. "Why?" she begged, her thoughts bleeding into the void. "Why me? Why my soul?" The mask leaned close. The voice came again, layered with echoes of centuries, each syllable a weight of doom. "Because you opened the gates." She tried to turn away, but the sea itself held her in place. He pulled her closer, and though his mask revealed no mouth, she felt his breath. Cold, endless, hollow, it filled her lungs, and she realized with horror that she could breathe. She was no longer drowning. She was being remade. Her terror turned to despair, for death would have been mercy. But this was eternal. And so he claimed her. The city above sank further, marble towers dissolving, markets vanishing, torches extinguished. But in the abyss, something terrible unfolded. Dahat's scream turned into laughter, hollow and sharp, echoing through the deep. She felt her body change, her skin pale as bone, her hair streaming like seaweed, her eyes glowing with a green light no mortal should bear. She no longer needed breath, no longer needed warmth. She belonged to the sea, but not to the sea alone. To him, the devil, the stranger, the mass of crimson, whatever name men would give him. He was hers now, and she his. He pulled her closer, whispering promises not of death but of eternity. She would not fade, he told her. She would reign, not over towers of marble, not over streets of stone, but over a kingdom eternal, drowned yet alive, broken yet unbroken. And so, while YS drowned, its people did not die. Not fully. The waves consumed them. Yes, the water filled their lungs, crushed their bones, silenced their cries. But in the abyss, their eyes still flickered. Their mouths still moved in silent prayers. Their hearts still beat, slow and muffled, echoing in the currents. They drifted through the streets that no longer were streets, gathered in halls that no longer had walls, wandered markets that no longer had roofs. They were neither alive nor dead. They were caught bound, suspended in the eternal twilight of the drowned. The city still breathed under the black waves. YS remained, shimmering faintly in the gloom. Its towers, though broken, glowed with ghostly light. Its streets, though flooded, echoed with whispers of steps. Its bells, though drowned, rang faintly in the currents, tolling not for time but for eternity. Gradlon, galloping toward the shore, did not know this. He thought his city gone, his daughter lost, his people dead. He thought the sea had claimed all. But the truth was stranger, darker. YS was not gone. It was transformed, pulled into a half-world where the living and the dead blurred, where Dahat now ruled not as princess, but as queen of the drowned. And beside her, the red mask gleamed, watching, waiting. The centuries to come would tell many tales. Some said Dahat became a demon of the sea, luring sailors with her beauty. Her voice sweeter than sirens, dragging them beneath to join her drowned court. Others swore she wandered the waves at night, her hair streaming like weeds, her crown glinting in moonlight, her laughter echoing across the storm. And still others whispered that she sat upon a throne of coral in the abyss. Her people gathered before her, worshipping in silence, forever bound by the bargain she had struck. For the stranger had not taken her soul alone. He had taken the cities as well. And the proof of it, the curse of it, lingers to this day. For when storms rage on the coast of Brittany, when lightning tears the sky and thunder cracks the earth, fishermen swear they hear the bells, not bells rung by hands of flesh, not bells swinging in steeples of stone, but drowned bells, bells muffled by water, tolling beneath the sea. They toll for the dead who do not rest. They toll for a city that still breathes beneath the waves. They toll for a bargain struck with the devil, a bargain sealed by betrayal. And with each toll, the sea whispers the same promise. YS is not gone. YS is waiting. The night Gradlon fled. The bells began. Faint at first, lost beneath the roar of the storm. But as the waves settled, as silence fell, they grew louder, clearer, carrying across the water to every shore. Men woke from their sleep, their hearts pounding, their skin cold. Women wept, clutching their children, swearing they heard voices calling their names. The bells tolled and the world knew. YS still lived, but not as it once had. Beneath the waves, Dahat laughed. Sailors whisper of lights that flicker below the water, not the glow of the moon reflected in the waves, not the glimmer of lanterns swinging on distant ships, but steady flames that should not burn beneath the sea. They say that when the night is blackest, when storms press close to the coast of Brittany, those who stare too long into the dark water will see processions marching in silence, lines of figures cloaked in shadows, bearing torches that glow faintly beneath the waves. They walk the drowned streets of YS as if time itself has refused to move, as if the city did not die but merely shifted into another realm. The bells still toll, muffled, deep, carried on the currents. At first, one thinks it must be thunder rolling across the sea. But listen longer, and you hear the rhythm. The steady strike of metal on metal, tolling for a people who never left, tolling for a queen who rules still. For Dahat did not vanish. When her father cast her into the abyss, when the waves closed over her, she did not join the dead. She was claimed. The stranger in the red mask dragged her deeper, binding her not to death but to eternity. And in that bargain, Dahat was transformed. She became what sailors now call the Morgan of the Sea, the queen of drowned souls. Her beauty remained, but changed, her hair flowing like black weeds in the current. Her eyes glowed with a light that belonged not to heaven or earth, but to the abyss itself. She walks still in her jeweled crown, though it gleams now with salt and blood, and around her drift the people of YS, her eternal court. It is said she sits upon a throne of coral, her palace rebuilt not from marble, but from bone and stone swallowed by the waves. Around her people gather, their eyes open, their mouths moving though no sound escapes. They are neither alive nor dead, caught forever in the moment of drowning. Some still clutch goblets, their wine replaced by brine. Some still hold hands, lovers frozen mid-embrace. Priests still raise their torches, though the flames burn not with fire, but with eerie blue light that flickers without consuming. Time froze in the instant YS sank, and beneath the sea, that moment stretches into eternity. The kingdom lives on, but in silence, in shadows, in eternal twilight. Fishermen tell of strange encounters. They swear that nets cast near the coast sometimes rise heavy with objects no living hand should hold. Chalices encrusted with coral, golden coins stamped with faces forgotten by history, fragment of stone etched with runes no scholar can translate. Sometimes the nets come up torn, as if slashed by unseen knives. And sometimes the fishermen do not return at all. Their boats drift empty to shore, their lanterns swinging, their sails tattered, but their bodies gone, as if the sea has called them down to join the procession below. The lore deepens. It is that Dahat herself rises at times, not fully, not in flesh, but in shadow and song. Her voice drifts across the waves, sweeter than sirens, promising comfort, riches, desire. Sailors who hear are lost. They lean too far over their ships, reaching for the phantom figures shimmering in the waves. They fall and the sea takes them. Their cries vanish before they touch the water, and their places in the silent procession are filled. The Morgan of the Sea does not forgive. She does not forget. She rules her drowned kingdom with the same hunger she once ruled YS. Only now her power stretches far beyond walls of marble. Now the ocean itself bends to her, and the drowned obey her without question. There are those who claim to have seen her crown in moonlight, rising briefly to the surface before vanishing again. They say it glitters not with jewels alone, but with drops of blood that never wash away. And those who see it are cursed. For the next storm that rises will call their name in the toll of the bells. The atmosphere of YS beneath the sea is unlike any world of the living. Imagine walking through streets where no wind blows, where no birds call, where every figure moves without sound. Imagine torches that burn without heat, banners that drift like ghosts, songs that echo without voices. Imagine a queen whose smile freezes a soul, whose eyes burn brighter than the sun though no light breaks the waves. That is YS now, a ghost kingdom, eternal, suspended, alive in death, and the world above cannot escape its pull. Stories travel across France, across Europe, carried by sailors who claim to have glimpsed the drowned kingdom. Some say they saw towers rising briefly through the mist, glowing faintly before vanishing like smoke. Others swear that when their ships passed too close, they felt hands brush against the hull, as if the drowned were reaching upward, begging to be freed, or to pull them down. One story chills the heart more than most. There was a diver, bold and reckless, who swore he would bring proof of YS to the world. He descended beneath the waves with ropes tied to his body, lanterns clutched in trembling hands, his heart pounding with both fear and wonder. For a time, the rope tugged steady, signaling his progress. Then it grew still. The men above strained to hear, to feel, to know what he saw. Minutes passed, stretching into eternity. At last, the rope jerked again, violent, as though something below had seized it. The men hauled with all their strength, their arms burning, their lungs aching. The rope rose, inch by inch, heavy as though dragging the sea itself. Finally, the diver broke the surface. His face was white, his lips blue, his eyes wide with terror. He gasped, choking, water spilling from his mouth. And in his hand, clenched so tightly the men had to pry his fingers open, was a crown. It glittered with jewels that shone even in the gray light of dawn. But the jewels were slick, dripping not only with salt, but with blood that clung to the metal and would not wash away. The men recoiled. The diver screamed, his voice hoarse, his eyes wild. He swore he had seen them. The streets, the towers, the people walking still. He swore he had seen Dot on her throne, her eyes burning with green fire, her lips curved in laughter that echoed through the water. He swore she had reached for him, her fingers brushing his arm, her crown slipping as she leaned closer. And then, somehow, he had torn it from her, seized it, and fled. But even as he told his tale, his body trembled, his hands shook, his eyes darted to the waves as if they whispered his name. He clutched at the crown again, screaming that it was his, that it proved everything. That night, he vanished. His boat drifted empty to shore, his lantern swinging, his ropes cut clean through. The crown lay upon the deck, still dripping with saltwater blood, and the bells tolled louder than ever. The coast of Brittany was always at war with the sea. Waves rose like clenched fists against the jagged cliffs, and storms seemed to find the land as though guided by memory, as though they had been summoned by something older than wind or tide. For centuries, fishermen and peasants whispered the same thing, that these storms were not natural, that the roaring of the surf and the thunder rolling over black clouds were the wrath of a queen who refused to be forgotten. Her name was Dot, and her city had been swallowed whole by the sea. Legends lived longer than men. They clung to bloodlines and villages, shifting shape with each retelling. But here, along the wild coast, the tale of Dot did not fade. Parents told their children that the storms striking the Breton shores were her voice carried across centuries. And they told another truth, or perhaps a threat, wrapped in a curse that echoed like drowned bells. Every king who forgot God, every woman who betrayed, would hear the bells toll beneath the sea. It was a warning, and it was a promise. Sailors swore that in the dead of night, when storms raged and lightning split the sky, they could hear bells tolling deep beneath the waves. Bells that no church had ever built. Bells from cathedral that had drowned with the city of YS. Those who heard them grew pale, their eyes haunted, as though the sound did not just strike their ears but carved itself into their blood. And that was the heart of the curse. Guilt passed down through bloodlines, carried like an invisible inheritance. Fathers whispered of it to sons, mothers to daughters. Not one generation of Brittany escaped it. Some mocked the legend in daylight, laughing in taverns or over harvest fires. But at night, when the sea was restless, laughter vanished. The curse was a shadow stretched across centuries. Even kings could not escape it. The dukes and rulers of Brittany, and even the crowned kings of France, were said to have dreamt of the drowned bells. Some recorded visions of halls filling with water, of hands reaching up from the tide, of Dod's face half beautiful, half decayed, rising in moonlight. The chroniclers wrote carefully, but the whispers were less restrained. The curse of Wyas clung to the throne like salt to the wound of the sea. And so, through the Middle Ages, storms beat against the coast with a kind of vengeance. Fishermen who drowned were said to have been claimed by Dahet's hunger. Churches that fell to fire or flood were blamed on her wrath. And each time, the story of the curse grew darker, stitched tighter into the memory of Brittany. The people carried it like a second skin. The fear of betrayal, the weight of guilt, the suspicion that even the most innocent might bear an unseen burden. Daughters grew up being told not to betray, not to falter, for the drowned bells would find them. Sons were warned not to forget the church, lest Dahet call them into her depths. The curse was psychological, yes, but more than that, it was generational. Bloodlines carried guilt like rivers carried silt. Entire families lived in dread of their name being called by the sea. There were stories of noble houses who claimed to trace their lineage back to the courtiers of Wyas, and those names were whispered with pity. They said some of those descendants lived haunted, struck with madness, or plagued with endless loss. Children taken young, fortune swallowed, crops failing where others thrived. And always in the heart of their tragedies came the storm, as if Dahet herself remembered who they were. Centuries turned like pages in a book no one could close. The Renaissance came and went, but the storms did not relent. Sailors who mapped new coasts swore that no land was as cursed by tempests as Brittany. Poets wrote of Dahet not as a memory, but as a presence, her shadow lying heavy over the waves. Priests thundered against her from their pulpits, reminding the people that the curse was not a fairy tale, but a warning carved into the very fabric of the world. By the 18th century, the curse had become less a story and more a kind of national wound. Brittany remained poor, battered by the sea, scarred by storms that seemed to single it out while other coasts slept in calmer weather. People said the heavens themselves were punishing Brittany for Dahet's sins. But the truth was more human, more insidious. The curse lived because the people believed in it. It was in their prayers, in their fear, in the way mothers hushed their children when the thunder began. And then came 1789. Paris burned with ideas that shook thrones and shattered centuries of order. The revolution was not just a political fire, but a spiritual one. Kings were no longer sacred. Churches no longer untouchable. People raised banners not in worship, but in defiance. Yet even here, in the heart of this new age, the curse of Wyas found a voice. There are accounts, strange, fragmented, but repeated, that during the storm-filled summer of 1789, as the revolution clawed its way into being, thunder over Paris rolled with an echo not of nature but of memory. In the chaos of crowds and the rage of mobs, some swore they heard something impossible. Bells, not the bells of Notre Dame or the Paris towers, but bells that rang as if from beneath water, muffled yet immense, tolling with a rhythm too steady to be mere thunder. Revolutionaries, hardened men who had taken up arms against their king, were seen pausing in the streets, looking to the sky, their faces pale. Women carrying bread swore they felt the sound in their chests. One chronicler noted in the margin of his diary that, "In the storm of July, I heard the drowned bells of Wyas, and I knew then that the sea remembers." What did it mean? To the priests who still clung to faith, it was a warning that France had betrayed God, just as Dahet betrayed her father, and that the bells tolled not for one king, but for a kingdom. To the common folk, it was a shiver of fear, proof that even in an age of reason and revolution, the old curses had not died. And to the descendants who still carried in their veins the whispered guilt of Wyas, It was confirmation that their blood had never been cleansed. The bells tolled for kings who forgot God. They tolled for women accused of betrayal. But in 1789, they tolled for an entire people tearing themselves apart. And so the curse stretched across generations, binding past the present with a chain of grief and storms. The fishermen still heard it in Brittany. The waves still roared as if in rage. But now Paris too had joined the chorus of haunted memory. The drowned bells were no longer just a Breton nightmare. They had become a French one. The revolution devoured itself, as revolutions often do. Heads rolled, blood stained the cobblestones, and thunder continued to echo over the city. But those who had heard the bells never forgot. They carried that sound into years of terror, into the rise of Napoleon, into the silence that followed when cannon ceased. A sound that could not be silenced, that returned whenever guilt or betrayal ripened in the air. The curse was alive. It did not belong to one queen or one city, but to the generations that carried its weight. And as long as storms broke against Brittany's coast, as long as thunder rolled over Paris, the drowned bells would be heard again. And when they are heard, something always follows. Something waits beneath the waves. The bells toll not just for the past, but for the future. And the revolution, with all its fire and blood, was only one chapter in the endless echo of Dahet's wrath. The chest was not supposed to be there. It was discovered by accident, dredged up from the black sand near Brittany's coast. Where ships had gone to die and cities had long been swallowed by the sea. The diver who first touched it swore he felt it pulse, as if the wood itself had a heartbeat. But when it was lifted, dripping and broken, into the light of day, no one spoke of it again. They sold it quietly at auction to a collector of strange relics, who left it unopened in his study until his death. It was only then that the historian came upon it. His name was Adrien Kardec, a Breton himself, raised in Quimper but educated in Paris. He had spent years chasing the ghost stories of his homeland, writing books about the drowned city of Wyas, about the legend of Dahet, and about the red-masked stranger whose kiss had been the city's undoing. He had not expected truth to rise from the sea into his own hands. The chest was iron-bound oak, slick with salt, and though the lock had rusted into dust, the lid resisted him until it gave with a sound like a sigh. Inside lay little more than rags of sea-soaked fabric, brittle jewels blackened by centuries, and one thing whole, a mask. It was red, not faded, not chipped, not rotten, but bright as freshly spilled blood. Its surface gleamed though it had lain in water for centuries. Adrien reached out, almost without breath, and when his fingers brushed it, he drew back sharply. The mask was warm. No fire touched it. No sun had heated it. Yet it throbbed faintly with a life of its own, as it remembered the face it had once hidden. Adrien lifted it carefully, holding it up to the lamp. Its shape was simple, a face with hollow eyes, carved with some material he could not name. Not wood, not clay, not metal. Something older, something that should not exist. That night, he dreamed, he was in the sea, walking where streets once ran. The towers of Wyas loomed around him, their windows glowing faintly with drowned light. He heard music, the kind that seeped into bones, a harp, a drum, a woman's voice singing of longing and ruin. At the center of the square, he saw her, Dahet, her hair floating like black fire, her hands outstretched, holding the mask. But the face behind the mask was not hers. When Adrien woke, his sheets were wet as if from the tide, and in his hands, clenched without memory, he found a tangle of seaweed, still dripping. He told himself it was coincidence. His mind was simply weaving stories out of relics, as it always had. But the dreams did not end. Each night, they grew stronger. He would walk the streets of Wyas, hearing the drowned bells toll. He would see figures dance in the dark, their faces hidden behind red masks, their movements jerking like puppets pulled on strings of water. And always, at the end, the mask would turn toward him, and he would see his own face vanish into another's. By day, Adrien became obsessed. He traced every legend of the mask he could find. Some spoke of it as Dahet's lover's disguise, the one he wore when he lured her to open the gates. Others claimed it had been made far earlier, forged in the blood rituals of forgotten druids, cursed to carry desire and destruction wherever it went. A few whispered it was not a mask at all, but a face stolen long ago, a living face preserved against time. The more Adrian studied, the less certain he became. The mask seemed to warp under light, its surface changing, sometimes smooth, sometimes pitted. Sometimes he swore it moved, shifting fractionally when he was not watching, and when he touched it, it burned faintly, as if it did not welcome his hand. He began to see it outside his dreams. Reflections warping glass, shadows across his study wall. He avoided mirrors, but still the mask found him. He would open a book, and the letters would rearrange, forming two hollow eyes staring back. He stopped eating. He stopped meeting friends. He locked himself away with it, prisoner and guardian both. One night, desperate, he carried it to the ocean. He walked the cliffs above Dardanelles, where legend said YS had sunk. The waves below snarled, black and hungry. Adrian held the mask high, whispering to no one that he would return it, cast it back, and its grip on him. But when he raised it to throw, the warmth in his hands flared a fire. His body convulsed, seized by invisible threads. He could not let go. The mask clung to him, or he to it. The waves roared louder, as if calling it home. Adrian fell to his knees, gasping, and only when the fire subsided could he stumble back, clutching it tighter than before. From that night on, the mask did not allow distance. He carried it everywhere, wrapped in cloth, hidden, yet always with him. When he tried to leave it behind, he would find it in his bag, his pocket, even beneath his pillow. It was as if it chose him. The dreams turned darker. No longer did he merely walk the streets of YS. He saw blood now, spilling through the water, clouding the halls. He heard screams, muffled but sharp, and he saw himself among the drowned, wearing the mask, holding Dot's hand as she opened the gates. He woke crying, whispering her name, though he had never loved her. And then came the night when he did not wake alone. Adrian stirred from the dream into cold moonlight. His study window was open, though he had locked it. The mask lay on his desk, though he had placed it in the chest. And beside it, written in sea salt across the wood, was a single word: return. Adrian's mind began to unravel. He wrote frantically in his journal, scribbling theories, half legends, broken phrases. He wrote that the mask was not merely Dodd's lovers. It was Dodd's curse itself. That the mask had passed from face to face across centuries, each time devouring its wearer, each time leaving ruin in its wake. He wrote that it did not hide a face. It replaced one. And then one evening, as a candle burned low, Adrian did what he had sworn not to do. He lifted the mask. It was heavy, heavier than it had ever seemed. He turned it in his hands, studying the hollow eyes. His breath echoed strangely, as though the mask were already upon him. He felt the heat surge again, stronger than before. And in that moment, he thought he heard a voice, faint and whispering, not from the mask, but from inside his own skull. We are not two. We are one. His hands shook. He lowered it toward his face. The edge brushed the skin, and then he froze. For in the polished glass of the study cabinet, he saw the masked reflection. He saw it settle onto his face, though he had not yet put it on. And the eyes that stared back from that reflection were not his own. They were older, darker, filled with tides and hunger. They belonged to another man entirely. The red-masked stranger who had once danced with Dot in Weiss, who had whispered for her to open the gates, who had destroyed a city for desire. Adrian staggered back, the mask falling through his grip onto the desk. But the reflection did not break. The stranger in the glass leaned forward closer, until his breath fogged the inside of the mask Adrian had not yet worn. Adrian screamed, stumbling into the dark, but the face in the mask only smiled. And as the candle died, the reflection reached out. The prophecy had always been whispered in fragments, carried like drifting embers across the centuries. When the blood moon stains the sea, the bells of YS shall toll again, and vengeance shall walk upon the shore. Most dismissed it as a tale of salt-soaked legend, a remnant of a drowned city whose echoes belonged only to myth. But the historian Gail Labris, last of his line, keeper of forbidden manuscripts, did not. For years, his obsession had gnawed at him, hollowing him into something restless and fevered. He believed more than any man dared that YS was not gone, that beneath the waves, behind curtains of time and silence, it waited. On the night of the blood moon, Gale walked alone toward the shore. The tide licked hungrily at the black rocks, and the sea stretched vast and endless, shivering with crimson light. He clutched in his hand a crumbling parchment taken from the monastery vaults, the final fragment of the Chronicle of Morven, the monk who had seen YS drown with his own eyes. Upon it was scrawled a single line: "When the red tide rises, the gates shall unbar and Dahat shall return." The wind hissed like a serpent, pulling at his cloak. The sand beneath his boots was damp with mist. All the world felt suspended between heartbeat and silence, as though the very ocean leaned forward to listen. He reached the edge where land dissolved into water and paused. His breath clouded in the cold night air, and he whispered aloud, though no soul stood near him, "Show me. If the curse was real, let me see the truth of it." And then the waves trembled. At first it was subtle, a quiver like the sea exhaling after a long sleep. Then stronger, the tide pulsing, shuddering, until the surface quaked as though stirred by something immense far beneath. Gale staggered backward, his eyes wide. The air itself thickened, metallic with a taste of storms yet unborn. Then came the sound. It was not thunder nor wind. It was deeper, older, the toll of bells. 1, 2, 3. Their chimes rolled up from beneath the waves, muffled and heavy, yet clear enough to pierce marrow. They carried sorrow, centuries deep, the voices of priests long drowned, calling the faithful of a city that no longer breathed. Gale dropped to his knees, clutching his ears, yet he could not silence it. Tears burned his eyes. He had imagined this moment 1,000 times in libraries and dreams, but never had he thought it would cut so deep, as though every bell tore apart memory inside him that was not his own. He tasted grief that belonged to no mortal lifetime. And then he saw them. Lights. At first faint, like sparks adrift in the depths. Then brighter, steadier, shaping themselves into streets, towers, arches drowned but defiant. The silhouette of YS unfurled beneath the sea, its cathedral spires rising ghostly through the waves, its avenues lined with torches that had never been extinguished. Windows glowed as though the city still lived, as though its citizens still wandered in silence behind veils of water. Gale stumbled forward, his breath strangled by awe. "It's true, all of it, it's true." The parchment slipped from his hand and was carried into the tide. He did not notice. The sea roared, and from it she came. The surface broke, water shearing aside as though parted by an unseen hand. A figure rose, slow, graceful, inevitable. Her hair streamed like ink across the waves. Her robes clung like woven darkness, and in her hand gleamed a mask, carved of onyx, edged with gold, the mask of YS's last queen. Dahat. Her eyes caught the blood moon and shimmered with a light both radiant and terrible. Her lips curved into a smile, soft and devastating, as though she had waited lifetimes to breathe this very air again. Gale could not move. Every story, every warning whispered by monks and sailors had told him to fear her. Dahat the accursed, Dahat the drowned sorceress, Dahat who betrayed YS and dragged it beneath the sea. Yet here before him, she was not a monster. She was beauty forged in grief, majesty stitched with vengeance. She stepped onto the shore barefoot, and the sea bent obediently beneath her. Where she walked, the sand darkened as if kissed by shadow. The mask in her hand caught the moonlight and seemed to pulse with life. YS, her voice was a whisper, yet it rolled like thunder. You called it lost, but the sea remembers. The bells remember. I remember. Gale's heart pounded so violently he feared it might break. He forced words through his trembling lips. Why now? Why rise tonight? Her smile deepened, though sorrow shadowed it, because the world had forgotten, and forgetting is the deepest wound. But the blood moon is remembrance. It stains the tide with memory, and memory is a tide stronger than any sea. Her eyes fixed on him with a weight that pinned him where he stood. You opened the way, historian. Your hunger fed the silence until it broke. Do you regret it? Gale's throat ached, yet he managed to shake his head. No, I had to know. A pause. Then, like a blade slipping into flesh, her words cut the night. Then know this. YS is not lost. It is waiting behind her the waves convulsed, and for a fleeting instant Gale thought he saw figures moving in the drowned streets, citizens blurred and pale, pressing their hands to windows, their faces lifted toward freedom. But just as quickly they vanished, swallowed back into the depths. Dahet raised a mask and pressed it to her face. The gold lines ignited, searing through the night like molten veins. The ground quivered, and the bells tolled once more, louder now, closer, as though the Cathedral of Wyas had clawed its way to the very edge of the surface. Gale fell to his knees, overwhelmed by terror and wonder, his mind unraveling beneath the weight of revelation. And still Dot smiled. "Do not mourn the drowned," she whispered, her voice almost tender. "Mourn the living, for they will not understand what returns." The tide surged, curling around her like a crown. She turned her gaze back to the sea, and her final words carried on the wind like a curse, like a promise, like a vow. Wyas is not lost, it is waiting. And with that, the horizon split with light. When the last echoes of Wyas fade into the darkened tide, when the bells beneath the water fall silent and the moon turns its pale face away, the story does not truly end. Legends never die. They lie in wait, whispering across centuries, calling to those who dare to listen. You have walked with shadows, felt the salt of sorrow, and seen the glimmer of forgotten vengeance stir once more. But beyond this tale, countless others remain, hidden in vaults of memory, buried beneath ruins, sealed in letters never sent, or waiting in cities swallowed by sand and sea. If this journey through mystery and grief has left its mark upon you, if the haunting of Wyas lingers in your thoughts, then let your voice be heard. Leave your words in the comments. Share this tale so others too may stand to shore wonder, and let the story live on in every heart it touches. And if you are ready to descend deeper into more secrets, more shadows, more worlds between truth and myth, then remain with us, subscribe, and step into the circle of those who keep the forgotten fires burning. For this was not the end, only the beginning of what waits to be told.